Hello everyone, this is my Tumble spamming Speed Demon Huntress build. I'm gonna explain how it works a little later on, but let me show you how it works first. Alright, that's the build. I think you can play it quite a bit better than me. I'm not the most dexterous player, but yeah, it is pretty fast. So, how does the build work? The core idea behind the build is essentially that we're going to be spamming Tumble, we're going to be laying a lot of traps, and the traps are going to kill everything. That is essentially how the build works. So that we need two steps to make that happen. First, we're going to we need to spam Tumble first, and then we need to figure out how we lay a lot of traps and make the traps deal a lot of damage. And I'm going to just basically explain to you how I accomplish this in this current setup. So the way that we spam Tumble is essentially by using the Awoken Helmet. And the Awoken Helmet resets the cooldown of your support skill every time you enter Tormented or Delighted. And by Tormented and Delighted means, of course, the Huntress class mechanic, which is the little green slash red bubble in the left bottom corner that you see or that you saw during the gameplay. If it's fully green, you're delighted. If it's fully red, you're tormented. And the problem is, of course, that if you want to do that manually, right, and re-enter those states, you have to like cast twice and then cast another skill and then maybe this or that. It's very complicated. It's a very finicky. If you mess up, it's all the shit and you're all out of rhythm. It is just not for the average action RPG enjoyer. It is too complicated. We need basically one button builds, right? Like that is what we need. Maybe two, because this is a two button build, but you don't need to make a choice. You just press them. So the way we basically exit and re-enter one of those states is by using a mortal arrow with the Fulfilling Moments upgrade. The Fulfilling Moments upgrade increases our mood stacks or delighted stacks every time we the immortal arrow completes an instruction and you're not delighted. Now, you become delighted stacks if you recast the same skill over and over and over again, right? So we need to cast other skills in between, and the skills we cast in between, right? The skills we cast in between is Tumble. So we tumble, we get out of delighted, right? Then we get a proc from Fulfilling Moments that puts us back into delighted. Then we spam Tumble that gets us out of delighted. Then we get a proc from Fulfilling, and that's basically the way that it works. And that is how we reliably, constantly can reset the cooldown of Tumble to keep the speed consistently going, right? There are other ways of resetting the cooldown, as we will see, but this one is super reliable. It works every time. It is great. And that is really all we use Immortal Arrow for. Now, as you can see, right, Immortal Arrow, important to note, what are some of the important things? Instructions scale with mastery, which is why we're maxing out the mastery here. And there is Scholar's Arrow, which is one of the first row upgrades, which gives us an additional 5 instructions. And that is what you're really after, right? Because what we use Arrow Shot, and Arrow Shot does good things for us, it is not a primary damage dealer in the build as it currently stands. All right, that is how we spam Tumble. That is the core mechanic behind the Tumble spam. Now, how do we lay a lot of traps? So first to the trap laying part, and then to the damage dealing part. Tumble has an upgrade that lets us lay down a trap every time we cast Tumble. We're spamming Tumble all the time. We're laying a ton of traps. Additionally, Tumble has an upgrade that makes it shoot 2 volleys of Arrow Shot when you cast Tumble. That means we're casting a lot of Arrow Shot, and if we go to the Arrow Shot upgrades, we can see that it has Tracking Arrow. Tracking Arrow applies a debuff to enemies if they get hit by Arrow Shot that doubles the damage of traps. So that's the way we scale the trap damage, and also you get a chance to lay traps if we critically strike with Arrow Shot an already tracked enemy that already has the debuff. So that is even more traps. And that's how we get traps, and it's part of how we scale damage. But everyone that has ever played Slormancer and tried to make traps work knows traps are very ethical. Very ethical damage source. They're really hard to scale. They're super finicky. It can be super annoying to get them to actually go off. The trigger radius is super small. So we need more, right? And if we do a quick search, we can see that Sharpshooter of the Wild, unfortunately, doesn't have, besides the one trap laying thing, doesn't have a lot of upgrades, right? What we can do with the traps, where we look here, if we look in the Architect of Death, that has a lot of, that has here what it has: less arm time, increased damage for traps nearby, double trigger for traps. That's really nice. And what does this? Thrill of the Hunt. Whenever a trap is triggered, you get 40% movement speed. So there's a lot of good trap stuff in the other skills, so we need access to those in order to get access to the passives of the other subclasses. We're going to be using my favorite Reaper in the game, which is the Primordial Support Reaper, or Primordial Precise Grade Primordial Bow of Support, that we use primarily because of its benediction. And the benediction basically allows us to use the passives of the other classes. Now, to make this clear again, passives are the round nodes here, right? Those are passives, so you can see the passive tag. We get to use the passives of the other classes, but we don't get to use our own passives anymore. So that's the trade-off. That is the malediction, is that you don't get to use your own passives, but you get to use your upgrades for the skill. And there are some, we use, of course, Booby Trap, we use Evasive Fire, we use Good Reception, which gives us additional reset chance, but that is a little bit more finicky, right? And we use Assassin's Momentum, which is a 40% movement speed buff, right, as the basic upgrades of Tumble. But that gives us access to these very powerful trap upgrades, but also really good stuff like Engulfing Fire, which is 35% area increased size, which is really good. That affects our traps, because traps are, if we hover over here, are considered an area of effect. So that works with traps. We also get 10% pierce chance, 10% fork chance, 10% rebound chance for essentially free, which helps us with our Arrow Shot spam. And of course, we all know it, everybody knows it. If we're using Architect of Death passives, we have to use one of the most broken passives in the game, Evasive Magic, which converts our evasion into mana and really needs to be nerfed. If one of the devs is listening to this by chance, this is a problem. Um, and similarly, there's some really cool stuff in Mistwalker. For instance, super cool is Optimist. Whenever Serenity is increased by 1, it is increased by 2 instead. So every time we get a trigger from a Mortal Arrow, we don't go up by 1 um, Serenity stack or a mood stack. We go up by 2, which is super cool. We get crit damage, we get movement speed. There's a bunch of poison stuff here that you could definitely do. Like if like if you were doing poison stuff, then this is then this build could definitely do it. We're doing some trap. We're doing a little bit of daggers, a couple of daggers, nice, a little bit of daggers, but that's essentially it. And that is what we do. That's how you scale the damage. You spam Tumble with the Awoken Helmet and a Mortal Arrow. You lay traps with Tumble and Arrow Shot, and you scale the damage with Arrow Shot and all the passives you get from the other classes. That is the core of the build. Now let me talk about a little bit more about some of the details of the particular setup that I am using. You're going to go really fast, so I definitely think you want the Midas Collector's Bracers, which give you increased pickup radius, which you're going to need, and because otherwise you're just going to be leaving stuff behind, and you're probably still going to leave stuff behind. So, we definitely want to use the Visage of Relentless Transference. This is a bugged item from the closed beta, but this is another item as well. And the problem, of course, is that is a helmet that is in a helmet effect. So if you're progressing with this build, which you can, right? You can't level with it because you need the Reaper, you need the helm. But if you get those things online, you can definitely progress with this build. It's really good for tempo running and a lot of other things. If you're progressing with this, you really want to get this effect going. You really want Relentless Transference going. You are going to need some Ancestral Strike chance to trigger it, but it's such a huge damage multiplier that you want to make sure that you get it regardless, right? And if you look at the other legendary effects, we're using a little bit of evasion, a bunch of projectile stats. We use the trap bell to help us actually trigger the damn things. Very ethical, very good. We're using a bunch of broken stuff on this build. Evasive magic, very unethical. We're using Thornbite Rune, which is also very unethical, but it gets offset. Okay, traps offset it. Okay. Yeah, we're using more movement speed. You want a lot of movement speed. You'd think maybe Tumble, don't you want attack speed to make the animation faster? But the actual Tumble animation is very short. It just gives you, it basically charges you toward a specific location with increased movement speed. So it's an additional movement speed multiplier. So it's based upon your own base movement speed, which means you want movement speed, essentially. So we're using the Sandals of Speed. We're using Drunken Master, more projectiles to keep this all going. Winds of Harmony, reduce cooldown time. Again, it's different from cooldown reduction, right? This reduces. This is essentially a separate multiplier that's not affected by the 75% cooldown reduction cap. We're using Sandals of Leyline Energy. This is also another item. This is a boots effect that reduces the cooldown of other skills, of all of your skills. If you cast a support skill, which we of course do a lot of, and we are basically using it to cast more Immortal Arrows, because Immortal Arrow still has 1.34 seconds cooldown, and we want like more Immortal Arrows so we get more tumbles and more tumble spam, essentially. Yeah. And that's basically it. It's really not that complicated in terms of ultimatum. I'm using the area damage reduction one. Um, what could do other stuff, but I really like it. I think the critical strike damage one is really good when you're progressing early on, right? You want, in terms of stats, what do you want? Just look at the stats. I run a lot of cooldown reduction to, again, you want your immortal arrow is the limiting factor here. So you want to give there. I have some attack speed that is more a leftover from some testing I did to see if it made a big impact. I didn't feel that it did. We have critical strike chance. We had 80%, which that is plenty. And we need critical strikes to lay traps, right? And we need ancestral strikes to trigger transference, and transference are very important if you for maximize damage. We run 100% armor pen always. That is because it's over cap. It's over 100% because I need to rework this ring when I actually have time for it. We want tenacity capped. I'm not actually at 100%, but we get there. We just need a couple more reinforcements on a couple of gear pieces. Other than that, we run a bunch of area increased size and area effect to boost the damage of our traps, and we also run pierce, fork, rebound, and projectile speed, just to more arrows, more traps, more trapped, more just more damage to actually make this work. In terms of rune setup, we're using Thornbite rune. Again, this is very unethical. I know, but we're using traps, guys. We're really using traps to trigger it. We use Adrienne, um, which gives us we're allows us to sack this up very quickly. Um, in terms of attributes, I have this currently set up as my influence farmer. That's why we have a lot of bravery, which gives us more movement speed, which is also fantastic. Get a little bit of magic quality, which is not that important. I really like running willpower 25 because that um, gives us area increased size, which increases the size of our traps. I still have Zeal 15, Zeal 10 for the ancestral strike chance, though I don't. This build really doesn't need it, the setup anymore, but early on this is a very good thing. And then of course Fury always runs really well, gives you a bunch of stuff that you really like. You can definitely go 100 Fury, no problem. Especially the evasion multipliers here at 50 and 55 are really nice. Those are separate multipliers, by the way, so even better. Um, and another huge movement speed bonus. So this is like if you really want to min max this build for damage, that's what you would basically go Fury all the way. In terms of Ancestral Legacy, I use a really janky setup because the damage is pretty much at a point where IA just blasts everything. You don't really need to over indulge and just make the numbers bigger for the sake of it. The kill speed is important, and we're pretty much there. We want to use Raw Lock, of course, because that gives us raw damage, which increases the damage of our traps. Based upon the amount of mana we have locked, we have a shit ton of mana lock because of our enormous mana pool because of evasive magic, right? So, yeah, that's pretty good. And we actually use Spark Machine. The aura actually doesn't do anything for us. You can also, of course, run pretty common combo that I like to run is, of course, you run Air Conditioner, Burning Rage, right? You fork over here, and that gives you access to Comfort Zone, which is 40% crit if you struggle to cap out your crit, and it also gives you access to Warlock's Ascendancy, which gives you a bunch of really nice area modifications. So that is a really nice thing. Make sure you use the boots that allow Burning Rage to trigger burn, that then trigger Comfort Zone. That is a pretty good setup. And a lot of other stuff that you can do here. I like this because it gives me access to Ancestral Aberration. That takes care of all the Ancestral Strike Chains that I need, which is fantastic. And of course gives me access to Gift of Ancestral Speed, which increases our movement speed even further. And that is really the build, guys. I'm going to put a planner link in the description. And I hope you like the build. I hope you do something other, like you come up with cooler tech. I think the Ancestral Legacy setup could be a lot better. Maybe you come up with some cool ideas. If you do, please let me know, because I am always interested to see what the other people come up with. Anyways, have a good day, and I'll see you next time.